Hi YouTubers, excuse me, hi Instagrammers, hi Facebookers, how are you? Apologies first, I was hoping to do this video a lot earlier, but I think I've been poorly. I think I got the lurgy, but I'm not entirely sure because I didn't test, but everybody around me who fell ill during that period who did test positive for COVID, so I may have had it. It fundamentally meant that it happened to me like it did in the early stages of the pandemic. So my nose just ran and ran and ran, and all under here swelled up, and it blistered and it peeled, and I looked a bit of a mess. And I didn't want to do a video, especially on the subject we're discussing, until it had resolved itself, until it got better, because it looked a bit bad. And I think it would have distracted from the video. You'd have all been like, "Oh, what's that?" So yeah. So apologies, but I've been poorly. So Russia has invaded Ukraine. I saw a video about 2 or 3 months ago about Russia, its economy, and aspects of its military. I can't remember what the documentary was. I've seen so many over the the war's been going on for over 3 weeks now, so I've watched a lot of videos over the last few weeks and leading up to the events, and I watched a lot of documentaries, and I can't remember this particular documentary, what the name was, but it basically left me with the opinion that Russia was preparing for war with somebody. I mean, they were seriously considering going to war with somebody. They were building up their stockpile of reserves in foreign currency. They were building up their sovereign wealth fund. And they were making deals with people like China and just to protecting their back, planning or preparing for something that they either perceived was going to happen to them or they were going to do to somebody else. So it transpires. When the build up to the calls that the invasion was going to take place started, at first I thought, God, yeah, Russia could be about to invade here. This could look a bit worrying. But the longer it went on, the more I got into the mindset of, not predominantly because of what the media was saying or because certain left-wing media outlets were saying, but basically because I just thought to myself, seriously, you watch RT, Putin has been pushing out this anti-Western propaganda, and he's been using the unjustifiable wars that the West has been involved in for the last 22 years to justify why his country is so much better and they don't do that sort of thing. Well, he's basically not living up to that expectation. So I kind of thought he wouldn't do it because the optics of a war on Ukraine, bombing, civilian deaths, destruction, troops, all the stuff that comes with warfare, the blood and guts, I didn't think he'd do it. I never believed their own propaganda that suggested they would roll into the east of Ukraine and be welcomed as liberators and the Donbass would be liberated and the Russian-speaking Ukrainians would welcome the Russians as liberators. I never thought that would happen. But neither did I think Putin would be so stupid enough to invade his neighbour with all the blatant aggression that would entail after he's gone on at the West for what he is now doing in Ukraine. And I couldn't get my head around the fact that he would do that. So there was a time for about the week build up to the invasion where I seriously didn't think it was going to happen because I couldn't perceive that he would go through all that aggravation and that blood and guts and that horror, and he would bestow that upon Ukraine for spurious reasons. But he has. Now either he's bought his own propaganda, or, like some people are saying in the West, he thought this would be a quick, easy victory. He would get air superiority within a few hours like the West did. His troops would roll in. They would be welcomed as liberators in the West. They, in the east of Ukraine, they would be able to roll out of the Donbass easy peasy and take Mariupol and Odessa, and they'd be on their way to Kyiv, and everything would be hunky-dory. And it's not turned out like that. The bear has no claws. Or if it does, they're a bit battered. This war has brought up a lot of issues. One that a number of my subscribers have mentioned to me is the aspects of the blatant Western sort of racism. The aspect that people in this country are falling over themselves. Well, over 120,000 people have contacted the government to say they will take Ukrainian refugees. But you didn't see anything like that happening when Syria went up in flames, or when ISIS ran amok in Syria and northern Iraq. You didn't see that happening, and it sits uneasy in my mouth. Also, some of the commentary by the media. Some of the commentary by the media has been very worrying. The argument that because this is happening to white Caucasian people, we are more inclined to have our hearts bleed for them than if they're not. Some commentators have said it. There's been pieces on CNN where contributors to CNN have made such comments. I've paraphrased, but that's what fundamentally they've said. Yeah, so you can see how it's brought up issues. Then, of course, the no-fly zone. Well, there's an easy one for the no-fly zone. There's two easy ones for the no-fly zone. One, you can't have it. Ukraine cannot have a no-fly zone policed by NATO because it would involve shooting down Russian jets, and then we would be at war with Russia, and then at 9:30 on a Monday morning, my life would end in a bright, burning, hot white light, and that would be it. Because that's the way it goes. That's the way it goes. If you want to intervene militarily, NATO, in Ukraine, it involves going to war with Russia, and we all know how that ends. And if you don't know how that ends, get educated. Go and watch Threads. Oh, you won't sit well after you've watched it. Go watch Threads. Go watch War Game. That's quite bad as well. War Game's quite bad, from the 60s. So yeah, they stop asking for a no-fly zone. And the other reason why they can't have a no-fly zone is a twofold reason. One reason in two. One is the Ukrainians, to some degree, have air parity in the skies above their own country with the Russians. They're able to shoot down Russian jets, they're able to shoot down Russian helicopters, and to some degree, I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe they can intercept a certain number of cruise missiles fired by the Russians. If the air was policed, they wouldn't have that ability. They wouldn't be able to use their drones either to attack the convoys outside Kyiv, the massive long convoys that they've been attacking for the last week or so. They wouldn't be able to do that because they wouldn't be able to fly because the airspace would be shut down. The other reason why it's pointless is because the Russians aren't really using their air power as much as you would think they would. Not like you see when NATO or the West goes to war with somebody and they pound the targets from the air. There's no mass aerial bombing of targets in Ukraine, and I think from my estimates that is because one, they don't have air superiority because their jets are likely to get shot down. Two, if they did go out en masse, they'd sustain heavy casualties. And two, they don't really need air superiority in the sense of jets or drones flying over targets. They can just bombard targets with cruise missiles and long-range artillery. And then if the Russians bought the argument that it's too risky to use our air force, we'll just lock them down. We'll just use our long-range artillery and missiles. Then a no-fly zone doesn't mean anything because those targets are fired from the ground. So they wouldn't get stopped by a no-fly zone. They would still be able to hit targets like Lviv. So, no. Stop asking for a no-fly zone. Because it kind of messes Ukraine up as much as it would mess the Russians up and also cause World War III and a blinding hot white light that I might know about for all of about 5 seconds and then just be vaporised. Depending where I was and how far away the blast zone was, but considering to where I live and where the docks in Southampton are, and remembering the stuff I used to see when I was younger, I can't say too much because it goes into a bit of detail and I might get told off. But the blast radius for one of the impacts over Southampton, because Southampton was hit 3 times if there was a nuclear war. The first bomb would just vaporise my block of flats and I'd be dead. I wouldn't know much about it. I'd probably be asleep if it was a morning attack on a weekday, which is the standard practice, a morning. I'd probably be asleep. I wouldn't know much about it. So yes, you can't have a no-fly zone because it messes you up, Ukraine, as much as it would mean possible dire consequences for the rest of the world. But this war, I just seriously didn't think it would go the way it has. In the sense that I didn't think Putin would be so stupid enough to invade. Because I knew the Ukrainians would put up a fight. That was obvious. Anybody who's paid any attention to Ukrainian politics in the last, 15, 20 years, knows that they were going to fight if it came to it. And there they are, in mass numbers. There's lots of stuff going on, like, for instance, why are the Russians sustaining more casualties than the Ukrainians? Well, that's to some degree in the early part of the war. The Russians weren't actually out in the fields as infantry moving about houses. They were moving around in APCs and armoured personnel carriers and tanks. So the Ukrainians were just using the British-made Javelin rockets and the missile launchers that we've given them and the the rocket-propelled grenades, the new gen ones, and they were just picking off tanks and armoured personnel carriers, and each one of those carries upwards of like 30 men. So 30 personnel, it's basically men. And so they were just wiping out whole units, whole companies, whole platoons of troops with just one rocket launcher hitting the armoured personnel carrier, because the Russians weren't deploying as the Ukrainians were on the ground. And the Ukrainians seem to have a much better infantry capability than the Russians, because the Russians will not get out their vehicles. They seem to think their tanks are dominant factors that they can use to bully, and it's not working. The weapons that individual NATO member countries are giving them, are giving the Ukrainians, are doing the job. The Russians, they are not finding it easy. And the casualty figures for the Russians vary from minor estimates by the American government of about 5, 6, 7,000 casualties, upwards of 14,000 casualties. 4 now senior generals have been killed on the front line, and numerous colonels, commanding officers of battalions and regiments have been killed. So it's not going well for Putin. So he's either believes his own propaganda or he's lost his mind. I can see the rationale for it for different reasons, with geography and strategic and the gas reserves in the Crimea, and we could go on about all that, but I've only got less than a minute now. So I may do another video on this to explain other factors that I'm aware of, because I've watched a lot online. So yeah, for now, that's what I'll leave you with. I didn't think he would do it. Please like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. See you later, everybody. Bye.